Your roster is never complete. This is really an important point from Kirby Smart. He talked to Paul Feinbaum after a golf match the other day, earlier in May, and I want to talk about this for a while. It's actually very important. When you look at the success that Georgia has had in bringing in transfers, they have been extremely monumental, I would say, for the progress of the program. They've had a slew. I'm only going to go over a few. Obviously, the most talked about transfer in Kirby Smart's time has been Justin Fields going to Ohio State. And that was a tough one for Georgia for sure. Made sense for everybody involved in terms of Ohio State and Justin. But take a look at this right here. I'm going to talk to you about a player from each year, each recruiting cycle, transfer cycle, that Georgia's brought in. 2016, Mo Smith, starter on the defense. I believe he was a captain. He had that huge interception against Auburn to help Georgia, an unranked Georgia team, knock off a top 10 Auburn team in Athens in 2016. Mo Smith was the first person really that Kirby brought in terms of the transfer market portal, whatever you want to call it. It wasn't really a transfer portal back in the day. 2017, two extremely important guys. One more important for the 2017 than the other, but J.R. Reed and Cameron Neisliac. Now, Cameron Neisliac is a person you're not going to remember, but he was extremely important in 2017 punting for Georgia. He solved a problem that the Dogs had, and he was a weapon that year in Georgia's run to the national championship game. Also bringing in J.R. Reed, who turned out to be a multi-year starter for Georgia, also a captain too. 2018, this one was talked about a lot. Demetrius Robertson, who has not panned out quite the way that everyone had hoped, including Demetrius, but a five-star guy who had picked Cal over Georgia in 2016, I think it was, went out to the West Coast, had a very good freshman year. He's been dealing with injuries a lot during his time at Georgia, but he's coming back for a sixth season of football. Whatever year it is, he's coming back for another senior year. And so that's Demetrius coming in 2018. That was a very big deal at the time, a very big deal. In 2019, again, you had a little bit like 2017, you had two guys that came in as transfers, one important that season, one important the year after. 2019, Lawrence Cager, who was as impressive a singular wide receiver for Georgia as they've had really in a while. He's not the best receiver Georgia's had during Kirby's time, but he was as important as any one receiver for Georgia because really he was an adult the whole time. He was a big man. When he got hurt, Jake Fromm was not the same from that point forward. I mean, think about the touchdown at the Notre Dame game, the touchdown against the Gators. Those were both, you can call them game-winning plays, both in the late. I'm trying to remember if Cager's touchdown against Florida was in the fourth quarter. I think it might have been in the third. Anyway, it wasn't late in the game. It might have been at the beginning of the fourth quarter. And I think the touchdown against Notre Dame was in the fourth quarter. Y'all can correct me, but Lawrence Cager was a big deal. When he got hurt against South Carolina, that really, the offense wasn't the same from that point forward. I mean, they just weren't. Stetson Bennett transferred back to Georgia in 2019. Why do I mention Stetson? He started 6 or 5 games, whatever it was, in 2020. So he was another guy that helped Georgia along the way in Kirby Smart. And then 2020, a flood of guys that came in, McKitty, Jamie Newman, but the one I'll talk about, JT Daniels, guy who started Georgia's final 4 games of the season and has them, in position to win the East, the conference, and beyond. He's a guy that a lot of people, including myself, think it has been the key or the missing key, the quarterback who really can play quarterback and has all of the weapons with his arm that you need. He's not the best physical quarterback that Kirby Smart signed, but he is a very good quarterback. He has more physicality and more physical tools than Jake Fromm, I think. But he knows how to play quarterback very well. Just play the position, not just throw the football. So when you think about when Kirby's talking about your roster is never complete, that's what he's talking about. And, I appreciate everybody watching these, and I appreciate everybody going over to dawgpost.com because this is sort of stuff we talk about all the time, every single day. All right, there are no off days on Dawg Post, on the message boards, it's really the place to be. Let's get you through the summer by going over to Dawg Post and just checking things out. But when you think about where Georgia's at right now with its scholarship number, this is something that Kirby has said in the past. I don't talk about the 85. All right, well, that's fine. I have Georgia right now at 81 scholarship players who are still on roster, who signed or transferred in as scholarship players. So that means that they're at about 4 guys right now that they can still add into this thing. Now, I say that knowing now that it actually is 82 because I do not have the West Virginia DB that's coming in 2021. That's a guy that you're going to have to watch. So the point is that Georgia has a couple of guys with which to maneuver around and play with. The question is, who can they add that will play this fall? That's a good question. I don't know the answer to those things, but when you look at when you go back 40,000 feet and you take a look at all the guys that he signed, I'll read them off again. These were transfer players for Georgia: Mo Smith, Cameron Neisliac, J.R. Reed, Demetrius Robertson, Stetson Bennett, Lawrence Cager, and J.T. Daniels. Some of those guys are really important players for Georgia. I mean, you're talking about 2 starting quarterbacks in that time, a couple of captains, and it could be more than that with J.T. Daniels, a playmaker in Lawrence Cager, and an extremely functional punter, a guy you had to have in that 2017 season. One person that I talked to a lot, an insider at Georgia, after Georgia signed or Kirby got it's not Isaiah McKenzie, but the little guy who was kind of a fast, small receiver in 2016. Georgia was signed him, and he played a little in 16, but it was 17 that he really started to shine. His name escapes me. I don't go back and edit these, as you can see. But that was functional recruiting through the transfer market, for lack of a better term. Everybody calls it the portal, and that's fine. But it's really just a market of players. And there are, there are more than 1,000 guys in there. Who will Georgia add? Could they sign someone who's an early, who a lot of basketball guys do this, they leave early and reclassify? Could that be something that's going on? Are you looking at the addition of Eric Gilbert? I mean, I'm not reporting that. I'm just saying he's out there. So there are a lot of people that Georgia over time has had such success with transfers. Everyone talks about Justin leaving. And Justin, I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, you're talking about a guy who was a Heisman finalist. But it cuts both ways. Georgia, at the end of the day, under Kirby Smart, has benefited from the transfer game. As time goes on here, and now we're discussing as a league that players can transfer inside the SEC with this one-time thing, I mean, that's going to be really tricky. I have to say I'm not for that inside the league. I think if you're going to transfer, you can transfer elsewhere. You can play at Florida State or Georgia Tech or, Clemson, wherever, North Carolina. There's a lot of places. Just, if you started saying that Kyle Trask could transfer to Georgia or Alabama, we're getting a little out of control with stuff if that's what's going to be the new reality. But for now, transferring is a big game that Georgia's been successful in. Who will they add in 2021? Go over to dawgpost.com and we'll let you know the day it happens.